What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we'll be taking another look at my collection. Today we'll be taking a look at my military aircraft in both large scale and die-cast. So as you can see, we have quite a diverse representation of military aircraft in my collection, not just 1 to 400 scale, but in just various different scales as well. Some of these planes I haven't even shown on YouTube, so what we're going to do with this video is that I will showcase the ones that don't get any time on YouTube because I technically put them in a different part of my collection, and I don't really know for sure if these models are in the MADB database, so I don't really include them in my official records, but now that I know a little bit more about these models, I'm going to do a little bit of researching and whatnot and just see if, there's any way that I could add them in. So we'll start off with, again, the large-scale jet aircraft, the fighter aircraft and everything. So we will start off with this Republic F-84E Thunderjet, which is the newest acquisition for military aircraft in my collection. Got this at an antique store in Sioux Falls a few weeks ago, and I found out about this aircraft, specifically with the Thunderjet variant. There were 7,500 of these built, used in the post-war era, so after World War II, but they did have a lot of problems, so they didn't stick around for a while. But this specific airframe represented here, this was operated by the 31st Fighter Wing at Turner Air Force Base in Georgia with the serial number 92328. And this model was manufactured by postage stamp models, and I think this is like $10. It does not have a stand, so I put it on a Dragon Wing stand, which surprisingly the hole works well for it. So I was kind of amazed by that. And I'll move on to this little guy right here. This is one of several that a old friend of mine from school gave me quite a few years ago. So I got a handful of them off of him, and they've just been sitting in my room ever since. So this little guy right here is the Grumman F-6F Hellcat, which the U.S. Navy used them during the Pacific War in the 1940s, and over 12,000 of these examples were built between 1942 and 1945, so during the Second World War as well, these were built. This was manufactured by Maisato, I'm not sure how you say that, but they're a prominent brand. I think they make like a lot of other die-cast stuff for 1 to 64 scale cars and probably larger scale vehicles as well. And this is White 22. That's all the information I could find about this airframe in real life, so no idea on its status and just not much that I could find on the internet about it. Now move on to this little guy, which is another familiar airframe. This is the Lockheed P-38J Lightning. This was used by several countries during the Second World War, and over 10,000 of these examples were built during the war. This specific model that I have was manufactured by a company called Road Champs. This is not the first time you'll hear their name in this video. And this specific airframe, named Marge with the serial number or registration 42-103993, this actually crashed in what is now Papua New Guinea in March of 1944. And the wreckage was found in June of last year, so it took them 30 years or so, actually not 30 years, about 80 years to find the wreckage. And this aircraft was flown by Major Richard Bong, who was America's top flying ace, though he was not piloting the aircraft when it crashed. So I think from what I read, if I remember right, the pilot did survive that. But I will look back and just make sure that I can get that right. So if that was incorrect, then I apologize, but you'll see a text pop up if something was wrong with that. Now I'll move on to this little guy, the tiniest of the larger scale military aircraft. This is an Albatros D3, one of the very old biplane aircraft, and this airframe was used by the German Empire during the First World War. About 1,800 of these were built between 1916 and 1918. And I could not find anything on who made this model and what the scale is. There's no markings or anything. I can show you that real quick. But this is all the information that there is underneath that would otherwise include some type of identifying information. But it does have like some model number and the aircraft identification. So not too much to report on with that. But otherwise, this is a really cool little model. I like the all red color that's present on it. So now we'll move on over to Something more familiar here in the States. This is a U.S. Air Force DC-3. Most of you know what the DC-3 is and what it was back in the day. Originally used to be for a lot of war transport stuff. They had C-47s, that's what they were designated as. But in the post-war years, it helped revolutionize air travel and made it more mainstream. This specific model was manufactured by Road Champs, and I have no idea if one ever wore this actual livery with United States Air Force titles in a all-metal finish. So no idea on what that one is. And sorry about the tail here for one of the other models, so I'll move that one out of the way temporarily so you can see this guy better. But this one right here, this is a North American P-51D Mustang. Over 15,000 of these examples were built, and they were used starting in World War II, and they were used in many other major conflicts in the years that followed. And many of them are still flying today, now just used at air shows and whatnot. I've seen a few of them myself. They're really cool aircraft to spot, and especially the Tuskegee Airmen. That specific P-51, that's the one that I know most, and I believe that one's probably the most, I don't want to say famous, but the one that's probably the most well-known out of all of them that have been built. And this P-51 does have some connections to the Tuskegee Airmen. This is by request with a Q capitalized, one of the red-tail P-51s. This was piloted by Benjamin O. Davis, who was the commander for the Tuskegee Airmen. And this model was also manufactured by Road Champs. So I don't know much about the military model stuff, especially with the fighter aircraft that are made in these larger scales. Seems like postage stamp models, Road Champs, those are the ones that you'll find, and I think the former is the one that's a little more premium, so you get that better quality and whatnot. But most of these I either found at antique stores or, you know, a friend gave them to me. The Hellcat, the Albatross, the P-38 and the P-51, those were all given to me by that friend. And then the DC-3 I found at an antique store as well. So now we'll move on to the diecast stuff, which is obviously a little more within my wheelhouse, but it is always fun to explore other aspects of this hobby that I don't really know about and want to learn more about. So I'll go ahead and start way down over here at the end. Now, I was a little back and forth on including Air Force One and Air Force Two, since they're not exactly military planes per se, they're more like government VIP transport, but just for the sake of just wanting to have them in the video, and now after I thought about it, I decided to put them in anyway. So Air Force One in the back, this one is the 2016 release by Gemini Jets. And then there's Air Force 2, which is a little bit damaged. The 2009 release with a missing winglet, and one of the main gear wheels has also fallen off. And then I'll just kind of stay over in this section. This particular guy is not wanting to sit right, so what I'm going to do is grab a ground service equipment GSC vehicle and just kind of plop it right behind the model here. But even this one still can't support the model since it's not really sitting right, but there we go. So there in the background, there's a Janet 737-600 that was manufactured by Panda Models back in 2020. I caught that exact registration flying over Sioux Falls way back when, during that same year. I caught it flying over. I never visited here, it was just kind of flying around for whatever reason. So decided to pick that one up, and I know Gemini released one as well. I'm not sure if it was the same registration, because the one that I have, it is November 319 or Bravo Delta. I know they have a few of them based out of Vegas, and they fly up to a lot of, you know, like classified, or not really classified, but just these air bases out in the middle of nowhere. And sometimes you can see them on flight tracking software, but they'll typically turn off their transponders right before they get to their destinations. At least in the past, that's how it was. I'm not sure if that's changed, but that's just how it's been. And then there at the bottom, we have a U.S. Navy C-40. And this is an old Gemini Jets model from like 2002. And I got this off of Easy Toys for like 20 bucks because I think they were just trying to get rid of some old stock. And I decided to pick one of these up because why not? I thought it was really cool, and here it is, just sitting in my collection. And I think this exact airframe is still flying with them, but now it has an updated livery and has winglets. So if I can find an updated one, then I'll just try to flip this one for the newer release. But at any rate, we'll continue. So now I'll move on to kind of the back here. I know I'm kind of jumping around a bit because just the way that I have this set up. So we'll head back down to some of the smaller aircraft, and then we'll move into more of the transport stuff here in a moment. So here we have a B-1 bomber aircraft, the Rockwell B-1 bomber from Ellsworth Air Force Base, released by Dragon Wings, I think in like the mid-2000s or so. And this aircraft does not have movable wings. I know when Gemini released this, they did have the wings, you could move them. This is the standard configuration that they would have the wings in when it's on the ground or flying at slower speeds. But as the aircraft reaches Mach 1 and beyond, they will tuck those wings in, and it can fly supersonic relatively efficiently. So, and especially if you go to an air show and a B-1 is there, they do that high-speed pass, they'll tuck the wings in for that as well. Though they can't fly them supersonic because of all the regulations. You can't fly supersonic over U.S. airspace, with exceptions. I think there's been a couple instances where, like, some F-16s, they did supersonic speed, chasing after an aircraft. They were trying to intercept somebody. So I think in those cases, they could fly supersonic, but otherwise, you can't do it. And they did a lot of testing way back when and determined that supersonic flight, too noisy, it can break, shatter windows, and damage people's hearing, especially if they're flying at a lower altitude. So you don't want that in a very populated area. So, you know, the Concorde and all that did have its moments, but unfortunately wasn't really mainstream. But it did find a nice niche market with the very wealthy people who could afford those tickets that were like minimum $3,000 and probably even more than that on some days. But we move on from the supersonic transport stuff, supersonic aircraft, to some more conventional stuff. This is a CC-150 operated by the Royal Canadian Air Force. So this kind of falls in the same category as like Air Force One and Air Force Two over here. So just for consistency there, so that's why I put both of the Air Force aircraft in there as well. And, you know, Air Force is in there. That's obviously a military aspect of it. So it makes sense to put those two aircraft in there now that I say that. But this is another Dragon Wings model. I got this from some antique store when I went to New York back in 2019. It wasn't in New York. It was somewhere in like Connecticut, if I remember right. My family and I, we were passing through there, and we stopped at this antique store. And I was hoping that they would have like Gemini jets, because I read on the Gemini jets website, their list of authorized retailers, this place was listed on there, but I didn't see any. However, they did have a section for Dragon Wings aircraft, so I picked one of these up. I don't remember how much it was, but for what I got it for, I thought it was pretty cool. But I lost the nose gear some time ago, so the nose gear door is kind of in there haphazardly. So, not much you can do there. Down at the bottom, there's some of my 3D printed / small scale aircraft. So try to get the tripod loosened here so I can raise it up a bit. That way the aircraft in the back aren't exactly blocking your view. But there we go. There's a smaller scale aircraft, and we'll start off with this guy right here, which I have previously misidentified as a B-2, but someone told me in the comments section a while back that that's actually a B-21 Raider, which is the replacement for the B-2. They kind of look similar, but the B-21's a little different in its shape for better radar deflection and all that, so better stealth on this aircraft. I think only one or so is flying. There might be a second or third one now, I don't know. The Air Force is obviously very secret with the stealth bombers, so you don't really know much. And, you know, this might not even be the latest technology that's available. There might be something else in the works that we don't know about, and they won't unveil it for like another 10, 20 years at the earliest. So, shows you what we're capable of, and especially applies here with some of these aircraft. You have F-22, F-117, and an F-15E Strike Eagle. So these are all from Tarmac Designs, who had a bunch of these at last year's Airliners International Convention. They were like $5 or $10 each, so I decided to pick a couple of these up. The F-22 and the F-117 are good, but the F-15 and the B-21 lost a wheel on each of them. So I think they're still sitting around somewhere. I'll have to glue them on when I have some time on my hands. But yeah, these are really nice little models, and they're all 1:400 scale. They look great, and I love the all black that they use for the F-117. Very cool, and obviously reminiscent of what the actual aircraft looked like in real life, but you don't have all the little titles on there, the little details and everything. This is just a 3D print of that aircraft. The Raptor, the Nighthawk, and the Strike Eagle. There's some F-117s still flying around as well. They've been spotted a few times, and I think they even went to Wisconsin a year or two ago as well, so not far from my wheelhouse. Maybe they'll show up in Sioux Falls one day. It'd be kind of cool, but obviously you're not going to get any notice of it because no one's going to say anything about it publicly. And then moving down, there's some 1 to 350 scale torpedo bomber aircraft. Those of you that have watched my channel for a long time, back when I did the Skippytown fictional airport, I had these in the updates occasionally. I would love to bring the series back. I know I've been asked by several people to bring the series back, and it's within my plans. It's just I don't know exactly how to approach that new series yet to revive Skippytown, so just trying to work out the details when I have some extra time on my hands, and hopefully I can come up with something that is very engaging and doesn't exactly, mimic something that's already out there, like the Storyline Airport series. That was a really good series, but I definitely want to try and find a new angle with these fictional airports and, have a storyline, but not something that mimics what's already out there. So now I move on to the transport aircraft, and to start off, we have a pair of C-130s. Up here, this is the first ever military model that I got many, many years ago. A C-130 Super Hercules for the Royal Air Force by Gemini Max. And I remember getting this because the propellers on this fell off. A couple of them fell off. So my parents super glued those propellers that fell off back onto the model, and unfortunately they don't spin. And I can actually take the model here to show the ones that don't spin. Hopefully the camera will focus on me and not the background. So that one spins, that one spins. It was actually just this one that fell out. So the other three spin fine, but the one on the right side closest to the fuselage, that's the propeller that fell off on it. Then we move to the smaller C-130. This is the new Fat Albert. They got this a few years ago, and it was 2019 when I last saw the Blue Angels, and that was when they still had the old Fat Albert, I believe. Actually, no, I think they got rid of the old Fat Albert by that point, so it was just the F-18s that they had during that time. So their shows were more condensed since they didn't have a C-130 width, but Gemini Jets released this in 2021, the new Fat Albert, which is an updated livery, and the old Fat Albert, for those that remember, they used to have the JTOW rockets, the jet-assisted takeoff rockets that they would apply to the aircraft. They stopped doing it in like 2009. They exhausted the last of the supply that they had, and since the Air Force wasn't making them anymore, or I guess the Navy, I should say, but they were used pretty often way back when, especially when aircraft didn't have as much power, so they needed those jet rockets to help assist in those takeoff efforts. I think like the B-47 Stratojet, which was kind of like the predecessor to the B-52, I think the B-47 had them, and a couple others, I don't know. I need to look into that a little more, but it's really fascinating, and I love watching those old videos of those JTOW takeoffs that Fat Albert used to do way back in the day. Then we move on to the KC-135 Stratotanker, which is an aircraft that has been around for as long as I can remember, even well before my time. Back in the 50s or so, they really started flying around, and they've been upgraded with some new engines, new avionics, etc. And this specific model was released in 2020 by Gemini Jets, of course under the Gemini Max branding. This is from RAF Mildenhall, so this is out in the UK, and the US Air Force, I'm guessing they have several aircraft stationed there, and this is one of them. So really cool design that they have. And I think the refueling boom, this does not come out, though it is kind of flimsy, so you want to be careful. Try to get the camera to focus on the refueling boom there and not the background. There we go. So you can kind of see that refueling boom. It does have details on like the air wing or whatever the aircraft is a part of, because I know like the Sioux City KC-135s, which occasionally come up to Sioux Falls for training and whatnot, some pattern work and all that fun stuff. They have that detail on those refueling booms, but they're always retracted, so you never really see them unless you're paying attention. Then we move on to this B-52 Stratofortress. This is the first one that Gemini Jets released in 2021. The only damage to it is that one of these little pieces right here, that little piece, which I think is like, it's not an external fuel tank, I don't think. It's some like weaponry or something. It might be a fuel tank. It's one or the other. But on the other side, that one fell off. I got this Christmas of 21, and from that point until last year when I was unboxing the stuff from Airliners International, that was the only time I got a broken Gemini jet. So we went, nearly about 2.5 years without a broken Gemini jet. So if that doesn't show you that they've improved their quality control, then I don't know what will. And when I'm talking about quality control in this case, I'm mainly focused on the assembly and not necessarily mold proportions and, printing and whatnot. The assembly part they have gotten really good at lately, and it is shown in all of their recent releases. Then we have a C17 Globemaster from the McCord Air Force Base. I got this Christmas of, I think this was 2020 if I remember right, or 21, somewhere around there. And I had a family member at the time, they were stationed out there, so I wanted a C-17 from there as just sort of a way to commemorate their service. So they're still serving, of course. Really proud of him and what he's done for our country and whatnot. But he's been around everywhere, so don't know where he's at right now. I think he's moved around a few times since then. But really cool to have a model from McCord Air Force Base. Certainly an awesome model with sentimental value. And a couple of those have visited Sioux Falls in the past. And then we have the C5 Super Galaxy, the big boy. I remember putting that in the title of my video, and for some reason, I think it's like the third most viewed video on my channel, so I'm not sure if it was the title that I used in the thumbnail, or if it's just a general interest in the C5 Super Galaxy. But either way, I'm really happy with that, but that's an old video from darn near 5 years ago now, because I unboxed that in the fall of 2020. But yeah, really cool model right here from Gemini Jets, and would love to add a couple more of these, especially as I learn about the the little tail banners that they have on the big transport aircraft. So in this case, this is Travis Air Force Base out in California, and then McCord is out near Tacoma, Seattle in Washington. So that, my friends, is my military collection. Longer video with all the fun elements that I want to talk about with these models. Each one of them tells their own story, and as I mentioned in a previous episode of my collection, I do this series to not only showcase a certain group of models, whether it's based on an airline, aircraft type, or I don't know if genre is the right terminology here, because obviously genre is more music oriented, but just a certain category of models, really, regardless of who operates it, the aircraft type, etc., or even like a certain era in time. So that's why I try to do these episodes, because it's fun to look at chunks of my collection in more greater detail, because obviously doing it with all of my models would take me probably an entire day, because there's always a fun story with these models, no matter how I got them, or what the meaning is behind it and why I have it, etc., etc. So if you enjoyed this episode of my collection, and feel free to suggest any new categories you want to see in this series. I'm open to suggestions, but I try to come up with something new every month, alternate between airlines and aircraft types, and then try to throw in something else into the mix just to keep things fresh with the series, and this is certainly a way to keep things fresh. With that being said, that is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.